This segment of the Chapter 13 lecture is titled The Impending Crisis, and the focus question is, what were the final steps on the road to secession? For many white Southerners, Lincoln's triumph placed their future in the hands of a party hostile to their region's values and interests. Those who wanted the South to secede did not believe Lincoln would interfere with slavery in the states, but they worried that his election indicated that Republican administrations in the future might do so. Southerners in the Deep South, fearing they would become a permanent minority in a nation ruled by their political enemies, instead decided to secede from the Union to save slavery, the basis of their society. In the months after Lincoln's election, 7 states, stretching from South Carolina to Texas, seceded from the United States. These were the states of the Cotton Kingdom, in which slaves were a much larger part of the population than in the Upper South. South Carolina, long extreme in its defense of slavery and states' rights, seceded first, claiming it was necessary to defend slavery against Lincoln and the Republicans. Secessionists equated their actions with those of the American revolutionaries as a blow for liberty against tyranny. President Buchanan did not confront the crisis. He denied that a state could secede, but he also declared that the federal government had no right to use force against states that seceded. Senator John Crittenden of Kentucky, a slave state, offered a widely supported compromise plan of constitutional amendments that would protect slavery in the states where it existed and extend the Missouri Compromise line to the Pacific Ocean. The seceding southern states rejected it, as did Lincoln. Lincoln insisted on no further expansion of slavery. Before Lincoln assumed office on March 4, 1861, 7 seceding southern states formed the Confederate States of America, adopted a constitution, and chose as their president Jefferson Davis of Mississippi. The Confederate Constitution followed the U.S. Constitution with some exceptions. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, the Confederate States of America's Constitution explicitly guaranteed slave property in its own states and any new territories that it might acquire. Davis's vice president stated that the cornerstone of the Confederacy was the, quote, great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, end quote, and that slavery is his natural and normal condition. Lincoln did not think war was inevitable. When inaugurated, 8 slave states of the Upper South, where slaves and slaveholders were fewer in number than in the Deep South, and where fewer whites thought Lincoln's election justified secession, were still in the Union. Southern whites were divided over secession. Lincoln believed secession might collapse from within. In his inaugural address, Lincoln tried to conciliate the South. He rejected the right of states to secede, but denied any plan to interfere with slavery in states where it existed. Although Confederate forces had already seized federal forts and arsenals in the South, Lincoln promised only to hold remaining federal property in the South. But he suggested that the Southern states risked civil war. In his first month as president, Lincoln tried to avoid doing anything to encourage more states to secede, encouraged Southern Unionists to combat secession within the South, and tried to quiet growing calls in the North for forceful action. Lincoln hoped to ensure that if war broke out, the South would initiate it. This happened when Confederate forces in South Carolina fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Lincoln quickly proclaimed that an insurrection existed in the South and called for 75,000 troops to suppress it. Within weeks, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas seceded and joined the Confederacy. Both sides deprecated war, Lincoln later said, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came.